We're here today with Ken Sipe of Gradleware and Matthew McCullough of Ambient Ideas, and the topic of discussion is build automation systems. So what are your thoughts?
It's where things are headed.
Well, build automation is projects have been around for as long as computers have been around, and there's always been a need to build. The automation around that has been a need that's always been there, really. But certainly we're working in tools in the Java ecosystem that seem to be aging.
That's true. And I think even a meta concern about that is we are more attentive, perhaps even hyper-attentive, to not doing the mundane things. We're trying to squeeze value out of the software engineers that we hire and trying to have them, where possible, work on the most intelligent work and, where possible, move off the boring stuff to robots, if you will.
Certainly. There's certainly no business added value for most companies around the build automation process, right? It's trying to build somewhat of a factory that's in the virtual space, it is, of creating product, and our product is software.
And well, in fact, I would say that the value is actually just shifted up a level. So at the developer levels themselves, they've never really perceived building as value creation. It's a means to an end. The end is the binary or the product that we're going to ship. But I would say that the level of management and IT infrastructure above it does recognize that if we can get it faster, if we can get it more consistent, if we can get it without human intervention so I don't have to ring up the person with a name to make this happen, they receive value, but in the end, the binary product is supposed to be the same thing that they got from the human in the past.
Right, right. Yeah, in fact, if we bring it back around to build automation, the question at hand, the initial question at hand, there's always been this need or interest of a toolsmith. Well, that's the term we gave it for years. But those needs have been so well known and understood now that we've commoditized that. We're like, you know what, and which I think goes to your point, is it's commoditized, we're raising it up a level to the extent that we're going to eventually be talking probably in a few minutes about continuous delivery, which is kind of the holy grail of software development.
And the toolsmith, on your point, just a thought that I had about that, has, as you said, evolved or stepped up a level. That was the person writing XML or a .sh file, and that was the low-level product that they delivered. They might have even changed version numbers on things, pressed buttons to send it into source code control. They might have closed and opened defects. That was kind of something that was in the right space for that person. And I think the next level that we're looking at is they become more the conductor of the orchestra, so to speak. The notes are still being played, the binaries are still being produced, but instead of running around and beating on the drum and doing the xylophone and so on, they're actually up there, actually just kind of watching the process go. Someone still needs to guide it, and there still needs to be a coordinated effort. It could be a Gradle build script in that case. And those things still happen, but he's now controlling them as if they're functions, as opposed to being down at their level, individually just flipping those switches.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, let's talk a little bit further in detail regarding there's two principal build solutions now in the Java ecosystem. There's Ant and there's Maven. And then there's a newcomer, Gradle, which I'm sure you're very familiar with, Ken. Kind of give, the survey that we have on the No Fluff Tour is roughly 70–80% are still Ant shops. The remainder is split between Maven, Gradle, and some other ancillary solutions. Kind of give us your overview, the both of you, if you would, kind of the landscape, where you see it now, where you see it going as we progress on and realize the importance of this space.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So Ant's been around for a very long time, and it's kind of shown its age, but yet for organizations that feel like they need full control, and there are times when that seems necessary, they still gravitate to that, which is why there's such a large market still in the Ant space. But the challenges you have there are no standards, really. You have standard tasks or targets, if you will. But there's a lot of value there. But if you looked at an Ant script itself, or compared a number of them, I should say, there's no commonality between them. There's always this effort of trying to share, and the sharing happens at an enterprise level at a maximum. It doesn't happen across projects or across the industry.
Everyone is as unique as a snowflake, and that's
Yeah.
not necessarily.
That's actually a good comparison. I mean, you know, the standard way of starting your a project, if you're going to use Ant, is to copy your build.xml file from a previous and start from there,
For a
right?
little organic
With a
growth,
little way.
shapes the crystal as it grows out to the edges.
Yeah, so maybe a good comparison would be one of those little Japanese trees, the bonsai trees. Yeah,
Mhm.
you prune it. You prune it till you get your unique
That's right.
shape. Yeah.
That's right.
And then, you know, Maven comes along and adds a tremendous amount of value. It really does. It was really a step up, and in that it started to define some sensible defaults. Hey, we can agree that, you know, project layout is not critical. We can just agree that this makes sense and then standardize on that.
Convention over configuration at the same time, just to kind of make a meta observation, has pervaded outside the build tool space too. That was kind of one of the first things that gave this that, but
Yeah.
we've then since adopted that in other frameworks like Grails and scaffolding, that it kind of be a similar implementation in a different line of product.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, and on top of that, the addition of dependency management, and you know, I guess we could go into deeper on that, but it's kind of a pro and a con. It's kind of a mess out there. It requires some governance. It requires some level of dependency descriptions and management, and as long as that's maintained well, then it's a great system. And certainly it's better than checking in a bunch of jars into your version control tool of choice. But
And transitive dependencies are a hard problem abstracted from any particular language or tool.
Absolutely.
This is a very difficult domain, and so to some degree the arguments for and against dependency graphs and so on are one that are outside even the Java space. It's a hard thing, but it probably has its benefits if done correctly with the appropriate shepherding
yeah,
of the artifacts.
yeah, absolutely. And then, you know, so we kind of started with many of the pros of both of those, but some of the deficiencies are, well, they've been around for a while, and that's not a reason to get rid of them, but certainly we've advanced as an industry beyond where they were created and started. And in the Maven space, well, they both are XML based, which may not be your best mode of being able to build a build file. Certainly it's frustrating if you have something of a small significance to add to its features and functions, to switch out of XML, go into Java space, create something, jar it, build descriptors, okay, now include it in, oh, you're back in the XML space, and there's a certain disconnect there that's just frustrating, especially if you're debugging and such.
Well, the wall is hard. I think that's the thing, is you're clearly in one space or the other, and I've kind of grown as a software practitioner to like more fuzzy barriers, not necessarily tight coupling. That word can be dangerous in other spaces, but in terms of my choice of how I use the tool, and in fact Git, one of my other favorite tools, is a great analogy to this. If you want to use it at the lowest level, it's right there, just make the calls. You want to use it at this kind of intermediate level, the calls are right there. You want to use it at the highest level, just some uber functions that accomplish a lot of things, that's your choice too. That wall is not a concrete wall that you have to punch through,
Yeah.
which is exactly what you're saying. You're in XML land,
Yeah.
or you switch chairs and shift slightly to the left, and you're in Java, and go between the two. I mean, there's an effortful transition.
Yeah.
And what if something's right in the border between? It's not quite a plug-in, but it
Right,
doesn't really conform to the XML. And you're saying, well, nothing. Pick. You have to pick.
Right, yeah, and on top of that, I mean, within the Maven space, there's a defined life cycle, and within that, I really saw that, and I think a lot of people see that as a value add. I initially did as well, but the one real struggle there is that there's not a DAG created. There's not an object graph relationship that's managed there. So we start to play tricks in that space. If you needed to add some extra functionality and it was something that needed to happen before compile, but it didn't really make sense as this given name, then you start, well, I'll fit
There's
it
no
in.
pre-compile phase.
Yeah, we'll do this, right? And so you start to kind of, you're starting to see things beyond where the originators or the creators of the system saw it going, right? And it doesn't match the name, but it matches the intent, so you start to do that. And then you start to have a number of things within one phase that need to happen, all three of these things, and you can order them, but there's really no dependency description between those things. And so you start to see a lot of breakdown of what is possible in that space. And so, you know, along comes Gradle, which I think is going to be huge eventually when people realize what it brings to the table. It brings some of the conventions of Maven along with some of the power and the ability to do anything you want to do that Ant provides, the control that people need. So there's a lot of huge benefits on top of, and we could go through an endless list, right? I mean, certainly...
building off the benefits of, to put it succinctly, I think as I see it, being a long-time Maven user and proponent is building off of most of the strong points and walking away from the ones that just didn't work all that well.
Yeah.
Taking the best, building on it, and things like the life cycle being this hard limit. As a default, maybe. As absolutely this is the 12 commandments or 23 as the steps maybe there's some room for some other unique builds in there. And so that uniqueness creeps back in and you say, well, wait a minute, you're riffing on uniqueness being a little bit bizarre, but they are unique. What I think you want to do is keep some sort of core standard and let the uniqueness happen on the fringes. You don't want the uniqueness to pervade the entire system so that it's custom. That's the danger. What you need is adaptability, might be the better choice of word at the edges, for the unique cases that your business has. Standard core, uniqueness very easily built around the edges, so that if the core gets upgraded, swapped, changed, you still have this thing to rely on. At the same point, you've got very nice modular and groovy language, modular little components on the side. But they don't even have to be as unique as a snowflake. One meta level around that is that those components, though, while not being full-fledged plugins in the sense of actually coding up a jar in the Maven space, can be uplifted and reused in other build systems across HTTP, on the local file system, in version control. So the uniqueness has a kind of governance around it, so it doesn't just rampantly become kudzu weeds growing out every different direction in terms of what you're building.
Right, yeah.
So it's a balance. I think that's the right word, is it's a balance. Take the best, leave the things that didn't quite work behind.
Sounds good. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your time. Once again, this is Ken Sipe with Gradleware and Matthew McCullough for Ambient Ideas. Check them out on the No Fluff Just Stuff tour or UberConf, which is coming up July 12th through the 15th. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.